Dear chess lovers, black played the move h4, and we are searching for a good move for white in this position. What should white play? And importantly, what is the question that you're asking yourself when you're seeing the move h4? Today, folks, we are discussing whether WTF is a good abbreviation, is a good checklist to find a good move in chess. Recently, one subscriber has recommended this to me. He said now he's using WTF algorithm because it's so memorable. He can remember that in his games to find a good move. What does WTF stand for? W is a weakness. Whenever he sees an opponent's move like this, the first question he asks himself is, what is the weakness of that move? In other words, what is the potential drawback of this move? This way, he told me, he does not only focus on threats, thus he's preventing passive mindset, and he tries to understand the weaknesses of the opponent's last move. W is weakness. What is T? T is threat, right? The opponent makes a move. Only after he checks for weaknesses, he checks for threats presented by that move. And finally, F is standing for forcing moves. Then he told me he's looking for all of his forcing moves to find a good candidate move. Okay, we are talking about WTF algorithm today and whether that's a good checklist to have. Should I recommend it or should you maybe improve on that? And for this episode, folks, I need your feedback. Please listen carefully to this episode and give me some ideas, suggestions. Do you think that's a good checklist, or would you rather agree with my recommendations and potential improvements on this checklist? Okay, folks, so this position is interesting because if you only focus on the drawback principle, you see this g4 outpost created as a result of the opponent's last move, correct? This pawn was controlling g4. After h4, now it has become an outpost on g4. In the actual game, white went wrong with the move knight g4. He only focused on the drawback of this move, and you tell me which move came as a result. Of course, bishop g3 came, and black won the exchange and the game. That's a very nice example that teaches us that solely focusing on the drawback of the opponent's last move can lead us to terrible directions. Okay? That's why you cannot omit the threat, right? That's the first conclusion. The opponent makes a move. You must ask yourself, what will be their next move if you don't play a move right now? In my recent book on Chessable, My Opponent's Last Move, I recommended this approach, right? To me, the very first question is this. Whenever your opponent makes a move, you must ask yourself, what would they play if I don't make a move right now? What are all the things that are new? Am I facing a direct threat right now? Because the cruel nature of chess, if you slip on that process for a single move, folks, you can lose any chess position. And seeing the threat is also giving you so much information that are limiting your candidate moves, right? Once you see this bishop g3 threat, knight g4 is not a candidate at all because it doesn't pay the threat. So all your candidates must revolve around stopping the direct threat of bishop g3 presented by the opponent's last move, correct? But if you start with the drawback principle, if you only have this BS mindset, I don't trust this move, I will exploit the weaknesses of that move, then you can also forget about the threat generated by that move and lose games like this. So that's the first conclusion. Yes, you might start with the weakness question first, right? You must try to identify the drawback of the opponent's last move, but you simply cannot miss the T part of that checklist, right? You simply cannot miss the threats presented by that move because of the cruel nature of chess. Okay? So I will show you one more example. For example, once you see the threat, of course, right? I mean, I can just make any move, yeah? Just king e2, maybe king g2, and then maybe you can slowly, right, exploit the drawback of that last move. This is a beautiful example, folks, that will reinforce my point. Black's last move was queen d5. And as you can see, black is now creating a mate in one threat. And in the actual game, the white player went knight f3. Okay? So I want you to stop the video right now and tell me the best move for black. But more importantly, what kind of questions are going on in your head when you see a move like this, right? Let's try to apply this algorithm I just mentioned. Would it be useful for you in this case, or maybe you go wrong terribly in this position, right? Just please stop the video, give yourself some time, and then you will continue from there. Folks, in the actual game, the black player only focused on the drawback of this move, knight f3. He interpreted this move only unidimensionally. He thought, hey, I was threatening mate in 1, so that's a purely defensive move that covers the mate in 1, but I will punish you because by playing knight f3, right, you're allowing me to pin your knight. And that's exactly why he played the move bishop g4, right? Because in his mind, he's exploiting the weaknesses of the last move, knight f3. What is he missing, folks? You tell me. What is he missing? Yes, as a result of knight f3, white has now created an enormous threat of bishop takes h7, followed by queen takes d5. Can you see it, folks? And he allowed this discovered attack, and white was winning this game directly. So what went wrong in terms of a checklist or thought process? That he didn't ask himself, what will be their next move if I don't make a move right now, right? That should be the first question to my mind, I believe, right? No matter what kind of a move it looks like at first sight, it can be a passive looking move, defensive looking move like this. Yes, they are covering a mate in 1 threat, right? It looks like a terribly passive move. But the algorithm never changes. The first question always should be, what will be their next move if I don't make a move right now? And you should see the recent changes, right? As a result of knight f3, now the queens are sort of eyeing each other, right? There's only a bishop that is in the way. So the question is, what will they do if I don't make a move right now? Then of course you see, right, basic tactical patterns. Very nice, very short calculation. You're facing enormous threats. And this question, once you see the threat, right, then our options, our candidates must revolve around this threat. And that's a beautiful part of seeing the threat first, because then, right, all of your candidate moves will be logically turning around this enormous threat you're facing. For example, knight f3 check is a very good move because it just comes a check, and if white accepts, we can end up in this endgame. Slight edge for black. Black will try, of course, it's not a big deal, but black is a slight advantage because of the structure. Okay? Or maybe you can say queen h5, right? Because queen h5 also stops the threat and also guards the knight on h4. So then you might say, hey, I'm happy about this, right? I'm happy about this because my pieces are sort of eyeing your king side and your king is more lonely, right? That's also a nice candidate. But you see, all of our candidate moves are revolving around the threat we are facing. If you slip in this process for even a single move in chess, you can lose any position, as this example demonstrates. And again, the dangers of starting with weaknesses first, that you can just hang up in those fantasies that you want to punish the opponent's last move, and you can actually forget about the direct threat you're facing. So use WTF only if you make sure that you will check the threat at some point, right? At some point, you have to tell yourself, okay, I can see so many defects of that move, but what if they do something to me that is dangerous, right? Regardless of the geometry of this knight, yes, I'm allowing a pin, but what has changed? What can they do to me on the next move, right? That question you can never slip. It doesn't mean that we should be passive players. It doesn't mean that we should lose on time by checking for all kind of phantom threats. And yes, I agree with my subscriber's comment here that he doesn't want to end up in a passive mindset, that he can see, for example, billions of threats, for example, bishop d4, knight d4, maybe something else as a result of knight f3. I don't want you to lose on time only focusing on threats. And this also comes with common sense, you know, like, of course, as you grow as a player, you will also get better in distinguishing phantom threats and real threats. Obviously, tactical vision always helps, right? Like those very basic tactical patterns. For example, the queen being a loose piece on d5. It's extremely important for this tactic to emerge. So you should have this skill of identifying the loose pieces on the board at any point, because tactics emerge from loose pieces usually. That's a great tactical signal for us to be careful, right? So this position requires care. Why? Because I have a hanging, I have a loose queen on d5. Yes, that's a loose piece because it's attacked 0 times and defended 0 times. But white can pick that piece on the next move if we're not careful, right? Another position, folks, very instructive. White in this position played the move knight b5. I want you to, again, take a step back, evaluate this position, the opponent's last move, what kind of questions are taking place in your mind, what are the threats presented, and are there any drawbacks to this move? Okay, so I want you just to evaluate the position, calculate some lines, and tell me the best move for black. Folks, that's a very nice position, because obviously when you see a move like this, to me the first question is, what would they do if I don't make a move right now and I see this knight fork on c7, correct? So you should very quickly spot these things. Of course, forcing moves are what you look first, right? That's a very forcing move, and you're going to lose your rook on a8. Okay? Keep that information in mind. It doesn't mean that you should react to this move, but the information is just crucial for us to start our analysis. Okay? Can you see any drawback to this move, folks? And now comes the W part, right? W part. What are the drawbacks to this move? Let's discuss. You see my bishop and queen battery, correct? You see this b2 pawn as a loose pawn. You see the king of c1 is not a safe piece in this position because of our piece alignment, right? You start smelling something on that diagonal. So by moving their knight to b5, they are weakening the entire diagonal, and specifically the b2 square has been weakened. Plus, the knight no longer controls the e4 square, correct? So yes, the question is this: what has become unprotected now, right? As a result of the opponent's last move, what has become unprotected? Because every move has a drawback in chess. So yes, this e4 square has become unprotected right now. Is that relevant? And now comes the calculation phase, right? You look at your forcing moves, of course. Knight e4 is a very forcing move because that will create a threat on the queen on d2. Suddenly we get excited. We don't forget about the threat, by the way, folks, right? The threat is there, but maybe we can ignore the threat and go for our counterattack with the move knight e4. Now I want you to calculate, right? I want you to now calculate the line knight e4. Does it work for black? Okay? You're a great player, folks, if you understood that knight e4 was a great move, because this queen has no way to guard the pawn on b2. You activate your bishop and queen as well. Look at the battery, and it will actually come with mating threat. So this creates enormous threats. Knight e4, mate in 1, plus the queen is hanging, and white has no choice but to resign. Of course, knight e7 check should be analyzed. Yes, I see your threat, but a simple move like king d8, and you have nothing else to do, right? That knight is already hanging. You have no time for this because of mate in 1. And on top of your queen is hanging, your knight is hanging, your king will be mated. White has no chance. So white has to resign in this position. That's a very crispy 3-ply calculation, short calculation, that basically exemplifies what I was talking about, right? To my mind, yes, the threat should be checked first. You gain information about the position, but you don't act passively. This way, you're fighting against the passive mindset. Yes, I see your threat, but I will also use your move to understand the weaknesses of it. Like a BS mentality, as Jeremy Silman says, right? Like whenever your opponent makes a move, be a little suspicious. Don't trust your opponent blindly. Actively search for the drawback of their last move. And you always combine these two things, right? That's always a balance, basically. And again, knight e4, and the game is completely over. Folks, the final position will exemplify one more checklist question that is so fundamental, that is so crucial. It's black to play in its position. Black is down a piece. We are searching for a good move for black. Queen f4 was not a good move, folks, okay? This queen f4 move was a bad move, but I want you to engage in nice calculation right now. Stop the video and please tell me, what should black play in this position? Then I'm gonna give you the first prompt after that. What am I talking about, folks? I'm talking about the very final step we must do before we play out our moves, right? I'm talking about the blunder check process. Blunder check process is decoupled from seeing the threat process, seeing the drawback process, looking at our forcing moves, coming up with logical candidate moves. After all these steps are done, we have to engage in one final blunder check, safety check, before we play our moves. And this process will also, this position will exemplify what I'm talking about, folks. Let's do it together. We are down a piece. We must be active in this position. What are you seeing? What is the first question you must ask yourself? They play the move Queen F4. Am I facing a threat right now, right? That's my checklist sort of abbreviation. Yeah, that's a step. Am I facing a threat? Well, now those queens are aligned on the fourth rank, right? Am I giving a discovered check to the opponent? That's a key question, correct? Well, I'm looking at this move knight f6 and knight h6. None of these moves are threatening, right? Because if they go knight h6 check, I can take both ways, the queen or with the rook. If they do knight f6 check, I will take back with the queen and I will be up a piece, basically, right? Just get your knight. So this short calculation is telling me that Queen f4 doesn't present a direct threat to me. And that's a crucial information to have, right? Okay. What is the second question? Are there any drawbacks to this move, right? Weaknesses. What are the potential drawbacks to this move, Queen f4? Well, folks, they are pinning their knight, correct? The queen is a loose piece. The knight is also a loose piece because it's hit once and defend only once, correct? So these two things should give you a signal that maybe there's a way, right, for us to win that knight on g4. So to exploit the drawback of Queen f4, now you generate candidate moves. Our goal is to win back the piece, somehow get the knight on g4. So what are the candidate moves that can give us that? What are our candidates to win that knight on g4? Folks, I'm seeing these two moves, right? These two pawn moves are direct attempts for black to win that knight on the next move, correct? Very logically, I want to attack a pin piece with a lower valued piece, namely pawns, to exploit the drawback of their last move. And now, once you generated those candidate moves, folks, we end up in a crucial process of blunder check. How do you blunder check these moves? f5 or h5? What if I told you that one of these moves is a huge blunder? What would you tell me, folks? Please, now, if you haven't done it, stop the video right now and blunder check, please, both of these moves. One of these moves is safe, the other one is not safe, and you must tell me which one. Folks, let's do it together. f5 is a great move in this position because there is no drawback to this move f5. f5 is a pawn move that will win the knight on the next move, because what are you seeing? They can only do these two checks to you, right? And of course, when you blunder check your moves, you have to start with the forcing moves first. You have to see whether the opponent can defeat your move by a forcing move. And checks are the most forcing moves in chess, right? So obviously, you're looking at these two knight checks in this position to maybe make them survive. Well, knight f6 check will be answered by not rook takes, because then you'll be hanging your queen, right? But queen takes f6, and we are so happy as black. Knight h6 check can be answered both ways. Queen takes or rook takes, and again, we are winning the piece. Okay? And that's basically it for this calculation process to take place, right? I'm gonna win your knight on the next move. That's it. If you do h5, by the way, folks, I want you to engage in this right now. I won't put it on the board. I want you to visualize, because that's what you're supposed to do in actual games. Imagine that your final candidate is h5. Before you play it, you have to blunder check your move. And please tell me whether your opponent can defeat your move by a forcing move. You're a great player, folks, if you understood that you allow knight h6 check followed by queen takes h4. Can you see it, folks? I won't put it on the board. I want you to visualize h5, knight h6 check, rook takes h6, and queen takes h4. Oh, unbelievable, right? Both of these moves look identical, but there's a gigantic difference between these two. And now I want you to verbalize. Why was that? Why is that the case, that this move fails while the other one succeeds? It's all about the h6 square. By playing h5, you lost communication between your queen and the h6 square, correct? The queen was guarding h6 at all times. If you did f5, the queen controls h6. If you do go h5, then no more control of h6 with the queen. Thus, you're allowing a discovered check, winning our loose queen on h4. Incredible, because after rook h6, there's no more connection between your rook and your queen, right? Your pawn is getting in the way, and you're allowing queen takes h4. Unbelievable. That's why pawn moves are so tricky. People blunder much more, to my mind, with pawn moves in chess, because it just looks like both of these moves are the same, and there's a gigantic difference. By going h5, you're blocking the communication between your rook and your queen. And this is what I mean by the blunder check process being decoupled, being a separate process of all the things I just mentioned today, right? This process you must do independently of all the good-looking candidates you come up with in the initial phase, correct? This move looks like a beautiful move, but it fails because of this very simple check. And you have to do it like a final safety check process. Sometimes the most beautiful looking moves turn out to be blunders because they're not safe. So in terms of a checklist question, yes, this must be done at the end of our calculations to make sure that our moves are safe. So shall we talk about WTF-B checklist, or to my mind, TWF and B checklist, right? You tell me, what is your feedback about this? Maybe we can come up with some nice acronyms to make it memorable. But to my mind, folks, right, we have to anticipate the direct threats we are facing when your opponent makes a move. And then we look at the drawback of their last move, right, to avoid the passive mindset. And then we generate a good-looking candidate move for us that speaks to the position. Of course, starting with forcing moves makes sense, right? But sometimes, or most of the time, the best move is not the forcing move, right? Just a small, quiet, improving move as well, right? But no matter what kind of a move we sort of decide to be the best, we have to finish with a final blunder check, something like this, right? First, as you can see in this position, we went through the entire position. We set our goal properly. We are down a piece. Our goal is to play actively and maybe win back the piece as soon as possible, right? Then we gain information. We look at that we're not facing any threats right now. Then we look at the drawback of their last move. They are pinning their knight on g4. And this gave us information to generate good-looking candidate moves. h5 or f5, right? Logical sequence, chain of events. But once we generate those candidate moves, comes the final blunder check process. And this again, right? You see, you're searching for the best reply for the opponent. Yes, you're always playing chess with both colors. Both for white and black, you're searching for the best move at all times. But sometimes, wishful thinking kicks in. People just have confirmation biases. They don't try to falsify their good-looking ideas. So we cannot ignore the B part of chess. And that's it for today, folks. This was the basic message of today's video. And you tell me again, what is the right acronym you can come up with this? I will probably make other videos about the blunder check process. Even make maybe a course on Chessable at some point, because of its fundamental importance of engaging in this final blunder check process, where most mistakes happen, as you know, right? Like people just throw games like this because of lack of proper blunder check of their moves. Please give me feedback, folks, and please like and subscribe if you like this video. That's very important for me to be able to produce similar content to help you improve your chess. Bye-bye.